We had thousands and thousands of wetlands created during the last glacial retreat. It just created this perfect nursery for breeding waterfowl. Across the Prairie Pothole region in Minnesota, we've lost about 90% of our wetland basins, converting those wetlands to farm fields. When you have drainage of these wetlands, the numbers of birds go down.
The state of Iowa was dominated by native tallgrass prairie and has since mostly been converted to row crop agriculture. But what we're left with are a lot of riparian zones and rivers that are still a semblance of their former selves.
Stone roller?
Oh, well, I should have known that.
You know, a lot of these streams have been straightened or altered in some way, and so we've lost a lot of habitat that a lot of our fish rely on in these prairie streams.
We have a really strong working class, blue collar, industrial history here in the city of Green Bay. And according to some, we're the largest freshwater estuary in the world. There's some competitors for that designation, but as the mayor, you know, I'm pretty confident. This piece of land was slated to be landfill, and thankfully much of that was not needed. And so it was turned over to the city's Parks Department to preserve as parkland. The Parks Department has wanted to do some more work out here, but didn't necessarily have the resources. So it made a lot of sense for all of us to get together and to improve what we have here within the community.
So when we bought the land, I had no definitive plan for conservation at that point, other than in my heart, I felt it was a very special piece of land. It had a lot of potential, and over time you learn the names of the birds and the insects and the plants and the animals, and you take a lot of pride in all those creatures have a place to live on your property. And nobody really owns the ducks or the geese or the deer or the pheasants. They're here, and you have the responsibility to take care of them. And sometimes you need a little bit of help to do that.
So the Topeka shiner is a federally listed endangered fish. It is a fish that's really only found in these smaller prairie streams. It used to occupy almost 2/3 of the state of Iowa, and that has shrunk to 3 primary watersheds now within the state of Iowa. And really they rely on off-channel habitat, meaning oxbow scars, which is where the river used to flow. And most of that habitat that now remains is on private land, and it's filled with sediment.
I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife and our conservation partners recognize the ecological resources that we have here within the community.
And luckily we were able to coalesce around this project as not only restoring habitat and enhancing habitat for waterfowl and other wetland-dependent coastal marsh species, but also make the area more accessible for recreation.
There's been a lot of work done to eradicate some invasive species, to clear out a lot of the trees which actually aren't that welcoming to waterfowl. It is much more opened up and welcoming, I think, to families and birders and others who are really interested in conservation sorts of activities.
Look at this, gorgeous.
When I was looking for just basic questions about land management, and I bumped into Sean, and his enthusiasm about conservation really helped me to make some decisions about best use of our land and best future use of our land. He was a fantastic resource to just get me the information that I guess I needed but didn't know I was looking for at a time when it was very helpful. It seemed like introducing bison back onto their own landscape would be making the circle complete.
Here we are buying easements from landowners. So the land is still privately owned, but the core habitat is protected. So with our grassland easements, the land cannot be plowed and it can't be built on and the wetlands can't be drained, but the land can still be used for grazing and haying. So we're trying to mesh both wildlife conservation and productive agriculture at the same time. So one of the primary ways that we can improve populations of waterfowl is by restoring wetland basins of all types and nesting habitat of grasslands. That's what we're trying to do, to protect that habitat with conservation easements and then restore the wetlands and the grasslands back. One of the primary ways we restore wetlands is we fill in those ditches that are draining those wetlands. We also remove washed-in sediment. Grasslands, we restore them by planting diverse seed mixes back in the crop fields, planting them back to prairie again. We started working with Jason in 2013. We helped him with a grazing plan, cutting invasive trees, planting prairie, basically turning a overgrazed ranch into a productive prairie again. And we protected that with a grassland easement with the Fish and Wildlife Service using federal duck stamp funds. So we have protected approximately 450 acres of beautiful prairie pothole habitat in perpetuity. You know, we have to have partners to get this work done. We can't do it by ourselves, hence the name, Partners for Fish and Wildlife. We make partnerships.
We each have different strengths we can bring to the table. So the Minnesota Land Trust is able to apply for these funds and manage the grants and manage the contracting, while the Fish and Wildlife Service is providing the expertise and making the landowner connections and bringing in like contractor oversight. And so we're all working together and we all bring a piece of it, which I think is pretty cool.
When you talk about landscape conservation, that's what we're doing. We're trying to link Jason's easement to neighboring easements to ones down the road. You know, in the last 10 years, we've protected over 7,000 acres of habitat in the Lake Christina Prairie Corps forever with the Fish and Wildlife Service and all of our partners.
We reached out to Barb and her family because we knew that this property had an oxbow on it. And we suspected that it was probably degraded and could benefit from restoration. The oxbow that we're looking at today had about 5 to 6 feet of sediment in it.
It's a spot fin shiner. That's a male.
And so one of the primary techniques we use to improve habitat for Topeka shiner is to dig out that sediment that is eroded from the landscape and put it back often where it eroded from, which is usually the hillsides that are now cropped. Iowa has a nutrient reduction strategy that is aimed at reducing nitrate and phosphorus to improve water quality conditions both here in Iowa and downstream all the way to the Gulf.
It's that big. It's that big. It's a big one.
When we first reached out to Barb, we also incorporated one of our primary partners on oxbow restorations, Iowa Soybean Association, who has a great working relationship with farmers and landowners in Iowa and have been a great proponent of oxbow restorations.
So this is just kind of another tool we use for edge of field practices and water quality treatment. Usually the dirt we get from these oxbows, really good black dirt, came from the farm fields. Let's put it back in the farm fields.
Yeah.
So pretty cool having the expertise of the partnerships that we create with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with the Nature Conservancy, with some of these other organizations. We can kind of be the middleman. If we have those connections with those farmers, we've built that trust.
Oh, that's newer. Yeah.
It's got the legs and the tail.
Our mission is to focus on fish and wildlife habitat and improving that for the American people. So projects like these are all science-based. We know the benefits from implementing them to both fish and wildlife and their habitat, as well as to water quality, and provide a lot of benefits for not just the landowner, but also those downstream water users as well.
You always wonder, you know, what am I getting myself into? And I tell you what, Derek and Brandon, they have just, they put their heart and soul in this.
Yep. And so those are leopard frogs. You see the little leopards.
They've really gone over and above on anything I ever expected. And it looks so great and big improvement over what it was. And I really appreciate that.
Urban landscapes are kind of like the new frontier for pollinator conservation. What they need is a lot of floral resources throughout the year in an area that's protected from pesticides and provides nesting habitat and overwintering habitat, and that can all be in an urban setting. The idea behind the Kroc Center project came about because of a grant opportunity through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program and Pheasants Forever, targeting youth habitat conservation in underserved communities specifically.
Can I do one more?
The Kroc Center folks themselves reached out about creating an outdoor classroom and how to create more native habitats on the land surrounding their community center. So the rusty-patched bumblebee is a federally endangered bumblebee, and they are located here in Green Bay. We considered rusty-patched bumblebees throughout the planning for this process, especially in the designing of the seed mix and selection of plants. So in that particular project, we worked with multiple local partners, but provided both financial and technical assistance. And that's just one example of how this conservation community just brings in these different unique perspectives and tools to the table and different voices, and they're all really important.
It was really important for us from the city's point of view to take advantage of all this expertise and potentially funding, that was available as a result of forming a genuine partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and some of those other entities. We experience a lot of port traffic coming in through the bay, and that's really important for our economy, but it's also vital that we protect the ecological resources that we have here within the community. And it's taken us a little bit of time to find that right balance, but I think we're reorienting ourselves towards some of these natural resources. And so for us, the preservation and enhancement of Kenyere's nature area is part and parcel of that entire effort.
Working beyond the boundaries of the refuge system is so important. The future of wildlife conservation to me is finding those mutual beneficial projects where we can have working lands conservation. We can produce an ag product at the same time that we conserve wildlife.
This project relied on a partnership with the landowner to willingly allow us to implement this project. It also relied on the Iowa Soybean Association, but also USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service. They provided the bulk of the funding for this oxbow restoration.
There are a lot of people with different interests and motivations who have been active in this partnership, but the thing that we all recognize is they're not making any more of this kind of land, right? So we're really enthusiastic about what we've achieved to this point, but even more optimistic about what's to come.
I think there's a lot of people that various types of outdoorsmen and farmers, and there's a little bit of conservationists in all of us.
That's the whole genesis of this entire program. And if we don't have landowners who care about this, we have no program, and we don't have conservation in America.
When I see these little baby ducks here, I always wonder who further down the Mississippi gets to see them in the fall. And when I see the shorebirds in the springtime, I think, I wonder just how far above the Arctic Circle this guy's going before he makes his little nest. You have to think big picture with this type of conservation. When you go out there in the evening with the family and you watch the bison and you're sitting there and you can hear them whisking through the grass, and you've got the crickets and the birds and there's all these amazing things taking place. It makes you feel good to know that long after I'm gone, long after my family's gone, the rare plants and animals, the diversity, it's here and it will stay here.